Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Gentlemen, since Kevin Samuels spoke with Nicki Minaj, I've been hearing talk about this class war and to a certain extent even an age grudge. I shouldn't say class war, but a class conflict and age grudge. And as an old ninja myself, in my 40s, I can honestly say that we get a perspective of the age and the youth because we have younger brothers and cousins that are still youth. And we have, some of us have sons that are even younger. And of course, a lot of people that are similar to me had dads, mothers and fathers that were baby boomers. And we got a lot of that old Negro ethos, some of which is indispensable, and some of which is unaffordable. So in other words, some of it we cannot afford to keep and can't keep, and some of it we cannot afford to do away with. And to be honest with you, we love to take that, the boomers especially love to take that slave trauma and pass it on down the line. I told you to jump that 12-foot fence. I don't care if you 4, you do it. And, I hate to say it, but we've seen that video where this lady is trying to teach her son math and he gets it wrong, and she thinks that if she just asks him louder and hits him on the head, he's going to get it. And Spice Adams has done a video about that where they did a skit where black parents are asking him, "What is this?" And then just gets louder and hits him on the head. And we, I hate to say it, but I'm not even gonna call them baby boomers. Ninja boomers screwed that up. Now I know that on the Wyatt side, that's the case too, to a certain extent. I mean, they do the same things and say the same things like you should have this much by this age. They don't care about the economy. They don't even care that they're holding on to jobs from which they should have retired. And therefore, if these jobs are not available to their offspring, they don't feel a god. So, getting back to the class conflict, I'm going to tell you in the Manosphere a mistake that the Golden Sphere is making, because you've been around longer and you're better at avoiding errors, especially once you know them. Some of them you've repeated multiple times, but a lot of times you're better at avoiding errors, at least once you know these errors are there. So here goes. In the Golden Sphere, I'm going to be honest, there are those who obsess about appearance. Now, appearance does have a bit of importance in that you need to be aware of how important it is to a small-minded mucker who doesn't have a leash on their neck stopping them from overreacting and mistreating you based on it. And if you know if someone's going to do you wrong, it helps you to know that they're going to do you wrong. And if that's the reason, it helps you to know that that's the reason. But the point, again, is not for you to be obsessed with that. And unfortunately, I've heard adults on live streams deviate from the topic of substance to that, and you just get sick of it. And therefore, I'm gonna tell you now straight away, I can't help the Golden Sphere. I'd like to, but there's nothing I can do to help them. Not collectively. Now, if individuals want to reach out to me for something, sure. And Weston, if you decided I heard that you shed some tears and sobbed on the stream. I don't know what it's about because I can't keep up and people don't answer my questions anyway. If you decided to reach out to me, I'd be willing to let you vent or listen to you, especially on Discord. I would offer the same to some of the ladies, but that would probably sound sleazy and creepy if I were to do so. And plus, I don't expect them to trust me. It's not wrong for them to do so, but I don't expect them to do it. And that's a socialization anyway. But you in the Manosphere understand something. See, when they talk about in the Golden Sphere those who hate him, they will use maybe some acronyms, UADSBW, and all they're really saying in that case is just unambiguous dark-skinned black women. The content creators will say not all, and they're talking about just their haters. But the point is that they haven't come up with a definitive term for those that hate them. I recommended ICSH, the golden counterpart to IDNS. I've recommended in the Manosphere for 2.5 years now, IDNS, intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotypes. Because Pookie and Ray Ray is okay to use as long as it is very clear to the listener what you mean and who you mean, rather. I'm sorry, whom you mean and whom you don't mean. The problem is when a new listener steps up, they don't know exactly whom you don't mean. And many people who come from the hood, zip codes with low average incomes, think you mean them. And when they're talking about the educated lame, a lot of times they're talking about the elitist. But when you listen to them talk about the educated lame, many times you don't realize that they're actually referring to the elitist. Now, the ones that are actually problematic are extremes. And most of us don't fall in either one of these extremes. The itness is an extreme. He might live in the hood. There may be someone that's growing up hustle but wants to be itness. That's another topic. But generally speaking, you expect him to live in the hood. See, that's the one that not only commits crimes, but his crimes have victims. He's not just grabbing some bread out of a store and running because he's hungry. No, he's got crimes with victims, and he's proud of his victims. That's the one. And then there's the elitist on the other end. He doesn't just live amongst the Huxtables. That's just where you live. Oh no, he has a very exclusive attitude towards who should. He may be the one that wants to eliminate income brackets, not behavioral categories. Do you see the difference? That's the elitist. On the opposite end is the itness. So when you say Pookie and Ray Ray to someone that you know very well, that's fine because that person knows that you're talking about the itness. But when you say it to someone you don't know very well, they may not be itness, but they lived in the hood or grew up in the hood or now live there, and they think you're talking about them because they're from there, when in fact you're referring to a behavioral category that breaks laws, and specifically in manners that have victims, namely robbery. They love beating people and taking their stuff and bragging about it. See, that's different. And some would say, well, what about the ex-Pookies or the formers? My question is, what about the non-formers? As I've stated before, when you decide that you, after having been an itness, an actual itness, and you don't want to do this anymore, did you meet the Malcolm X standard of reform? And that's the question that comes about, because see, what marks the itness is an anti-intellectual attitude as well. And I understand why it is that a thinking brother wants to see even anti-intellectuals eliminated. I understand why they have that mindset. Because a lot of anti-intellectuals may not necessarily be about, no, they actually are about it. So even if they're not doing it themselves, they will glorify the ones that are actually committing armed robberies. They will brag about armed robberies they didn't commit, and I think they should be eliminated. And I make no bones about it. Now, the elitist can be isolated. They can be stuck by themselves. Their penalty is that they're left socially isolated so that they can try to get absorbed amongst the Wyatts whom they worship, and the upper class Wyatts to whom they look up as well. That's their penalty, because they may or may not be able to be absorbed in that, and if they are, good riddance. The idness is a threat. He's a threat to the non-idness Pookie or Ray Ray, meaning he's a threat to those who live in the same environments and ain't committing the same crimes and ain't causing the same trouble. Because remember, he's anti-intellectual. He hates thinking, studying, reading at an age-appropriate level. It's in both of our interests to eliminate them. What is it that they normally want to do? Rob? Oh, that's easy. See, if you're not an idness, whether you're an so-called educated lame, which is actually an extreme, because who said they're lame? But whether you're that thinking brother, whether you're less thinking, in other words, whether your orientation is more blue collar or white collar, whatever the case is, if you believe in getting yours honestly, understand that the idness is the common enemy. The elitist is too, but like I said, that's eliminated more easily. We really do need to be about the business of starting to eliminate the idness. Like I said, robbery is one of their specialties. So first off, none of us needs to have an attitude of covering up for them. If they ain't out there robbing Wyatts, and if they were, they wouldn't tell us, because nobody's going to sit up and admit to doing that because they don't want that kind of heat, and I don't blame them. But if they're not out there robbing them, robbing the ones that are actually taking away from them too, I mean. If they're not out there robbing the ones who are doing the layoffs and things like that, then that means they're going to be robbing us. And they don't necessarily care if you blue collar or white collar. They care, do you have enough money and are you unarmed? And what I say is, we need to go ahead and start making none of us unarmed. I like what Mr. Sperling's doing with his sons. I probably wouldn't put him on the net, but what he's doing with his sons, teaching him self-defense to where one of them is able to grapple adults older than himself into submission, that's fine. Let someone try to rob that boy. He'll soon be a man. His younger brother, soon after that, will be a man. Let someone try to rob them. If it's a gun, maybe so. If it's a knife, those odds of success go down. What I'm going to say next may shock some of you. You still need to hear it. Those who commit armed robbery, we need to kill in self-defense. They need to die in the process of their crimes. Pulling out knives, if you're able to do that, and that takes a lot of training, and even those who do it don't recommend you try it, but if they do that, they need to die. And if you can't do it, then we need to have a straight up please snitch policy instead of this stop snitching ethos that a lot of us have on both sides of the income divide, especially the youth. Whether the youth are growing up Huxtable or whether they're growing up hood, it doesn't seem to matter. They all seem to have that snitches get stitches. Well, I mean, it's one thing when you're involved with someone and they turn on you. I can understand a sense of betrayal, even though I don't sympathize, depending on the crime. That's a good ethos to have if you're really about a revolution. But that's not what many of us are talking about. That's not what many of us are discussing. So we need to have a straight up, no, snitch him out. If you know he did it and you're not that type, snitch him out, get rid of him. And wait for him to get out of prison and say something. There does need to be a cultural shift. Absolutely. And many who come up blue collar, next to the idness, understand this need as much as I do. They understand that you have to have that Malcolm X standard of reform. There's no other standard really that's going to work. I've stated this before. They must change their attitudes. And so if you were a former idness, then in order to keep that former, you have to have a pro-intellectual attitude. Regardless of what you study, you got to be willing to encourage others to study things you would have looked down on when you were younger. And you also got to teach yourself. You can't be on here arguing with me about this and you misspelling and mispunctuating and misusing homophones. Sorry, how the hell am I supposed to even know to take you seriously? Nothing personal. How am I supposed to know? Because I could literally misunderstand something you wrote or typed in your first language, and anyone else could. So this is important. That's actually necessary as a gauntlet. If you can't meet that Malcolm X standard of reform, you still in ignorance. Many debatable Pookies and Ray Rays, because these are not clearly defined terms, understand exactly what I'm talking about. The ignorance also understand, and they can't stand it. And that's why we should eliminate them. And those who glorify them, they'll start to say, oh, maybe we should fuck the shuck up. I hope this helps. Thanks for listening.